G'day folks, I'm going to show you how to take your custom content into Western Press. The first part is the export process. We use a program called Sprite, which we've used for all of our art, but many pixel programs should export a JSON file along with their sprite sheets, and if they don't, I'll show you how to import a linear sprite sheet. So to start off with, a couple of important things is that your character should be facing to the right, and there should be a 1 pixel padding around the border of every single frame. Some let you do this on export, we just like to put it in the frame. Export your character. It's very important that your sprite sheet goes left to right, top to bottom. So a horizontal strip, a vertical strip, or by rows are fine. However, if your strip goes top to bottom, left to right, then the frames are going to be out of order in game. You can pick a number of columns that makes your sprite sheet look nice, otherwise just use a horizontal or vertical strip, and you want to export JSON data. So once you've done that for all of your animations, we'll head into the files. You want to make a new folder from Western Press, head into Workshop, Characters, and then create a new folder here. The name of the folder won't dictate your character name, so if your character is also called Poker Huntress, then Poker Huntress 2 will work perfectly fine. For now we're going to use 1. We will copy, you want your sprite sheet and the accompanying JSON file. So JSON die, idle, and shoot. We're going to take them into the 1 directory. Along with this, we're going to head back to the Workshop folder, which is located in Western Press Workshop, and in templates we've got character.xml. We're going to grab this, head back to our 1 directory, and open the XML file. Also, just to note, the JSON files that Sprite export are structured with a field at the top, which is important. Name here doesn't matter, but you do need to separate your frames like this. And then we need a field called frame containing these variables and a duration. Now, if your program doesn't export these in the JSON, then unfortunately it's not going to work, but these are the fields you need. Whereas the extra ones that Sprite includes aren't really important. Back to our character.xml. Now, a lot of this is pretty obvious. Does your character have mature content, yes or no? This is only relevant for local files. Once you upload to Workshop, then it's set automatically through the application. But if you want to ensure that it's shown because you have mature characters off or something like that, then you can change that here. Leave the GUID blank. You'll set the character name to whatever your character's called. We are Juan Aguacate. Author, Bandit 1. Again, when you upload to the Workshop, this is set automatically as your Steam name. But if you're only using your character locally, you can share it around with whatever author name you'd like. Now, the next thing is these texture fields. You should have one of these for each texture that you have in your directory. So we've got 3 textures: die, idle, and shoot. We don't have a wounded, so we're going to delete that. And then this name should correspond with the name of the file. So it doesn't need to be idle.png. For example, we have one die.png. So we'll head to die and we'll change that. As well as one shoot and one idle. Now the next important thing is the pivots. To line up each of our animations, we need to pick a spot at the same point on the character from the top left of the canvas. It's good to try and keep this in the center of the character, that way they're positioned correctly in game. So, pick a landmark you can hook onto, like we'll go the back of Juan's foot, and that is 17 from the left and 38. I'm just looking down the bottom left there. So 17, 38 for idle, and we do the same with the other animations as well. $18.93. And $94.85. Shoot, wounded, and die sounds can also be added to your character. these work similarly to textures except without an extension. So we do actually have some sounds for one. I'll just copy them into the character directory. And we want the names of these files without the extension. So shoot sound name is one aguacate shoot, and die. We don't have a wounded sound, so we need to remove the entry. Animations are all required except for wounded, and because we don't have a wounded animation, we can delete this. If you don't have a wounded animation, your character will flash red. Now, the texture number lines up with the texture up here, starting with 0. So idle is texture 0, which is the first texture. Shoot, texture 1, is the second texture. And die is actually texture 2, as we deleted the wounded animation. Putting loop here isn't required, but it does make testing easier, which I'll show you later. Now, the action frame of a shoot animation is the frame on which the other player should start their either wounded or die animation. So in Sprite, we can head to shoot and we can scroll through our animation and find where we think the point of impact should be, which is about here. Now that's frame 13 in Sprite, but that starts at 1, so we need to subtract 1 to start at 0, which means our action frame is frame 12. Our sounds have been designed to just start from the first frame, so we set that at 0. However, if you've just got a gunshot or something like that, then you can set that to the action frame or any frame, and then that's the frame that your sound will start. Same goes for the die sound, and wounded sound is the same, it just looks like wounded sound. And for those of you who don't have a JSON to fall back on, then I'll show you how to handle that when I cover environments. Now, taunts for characters are pretty self-explanatory. You can enter a taunt between the taunt tags, and you can have as many as you want. So you can have, taunt 1, taunt 2, etc. And they'll play randomly from the pool. And if your character doesn't speak, then you can actually clear this out. And instead of loading default taunts from Western Press, the character will not say anything. Whereas if you don't have one of these tags, then it will load one of Western Press's default taunts. When you're entering a taunt, you can also use \C for your opponent's name and \N for a new line. So entering \C, I love you. If you were versing Wyatt Hurt, that would say Wyatt Hurt, I love you. Characters can also have a card.png and a grave.png in their directory, and these will be loaded in and used just like our default characters. So in the workshop directory, under templates, you can actually find card.psd and grave.png. Now these are example files. The card actually contains the borders that we use for our cards if you wanted to match that, or you can obviously do whatever you'd like within there. So if you include in your character directory a PNG called grave and a PNG called card, then these will be loaded in. But we won't do that. So make sure you save your character XML and load up Western Press, and we see the fruits of my labour. You can see 1 in the background there. Idle seems to be working fine. You can actually head into the character select menu, and using P, square bracket left, square bracket right, and \, you can test all of your character's animations. Now if you don't have a wounded, P won't do anything, and we don't have a wounded, but square bracket left will play the shoot, square bracket right will play the death, and \, will play the idle. And as you can see, all the sounds seem to line up fine. We can actually just jump into a quick game. If we had have loaded a card.png into the directory, then it would have loaded there. And you can see the taunt here.
Alright, buttons go top to bottom. Do them fast. 3, 2, 1, draw.
Now you can see why its wounded animation triggered at the right time, but it's obviously easier to see
3, 2,
on death.
draw.
And that seems to be working great.
See ya.
Now, I'll show you an example of an environment already in the game, as it's a good example of everything, every possibility you'll need with environments. You can see here that we've got a background.png and a background.json, and this functions exactly like the character PNG and JSONs. We also have some PNGs without JSONs, and then another JSON PNG. So we'll open the environment.xml. Now, you'll have copied this from the same place you copied your character template, which is in workshop templates environment.xml. However, if you do copy another one to sort of start from, you need to make sure you clear out the GUID field, otherwise the game won't start up. You can set your name to whatever the name of the level is, and then you'll need a texture entry for every texture in the directory. Now, the first thing to notice is that some of these entries have frame width and height defined. This is for textures that don't have a JSON accompanying them. So you can see sky has sky.json. As such, doesn't need anything outside of a link to the texture name. But fog 2 has a frame width, a frame height, and scroll set to true. Now, scroll is only necessary if you want your background to pan across automatically without having to animate it frame by frame. So you'll need to fill these out if you don't have an accompanying JSON. The frame width and frame height will be the size of one individual frame. If it's just a static image, it will be the size of that image. Now, in an environment, we set our character position, and we can set our ambient track. Just like character sounds, this is the name of the sound file, not including the extension. And then this will be played as ambience when the level is played. Now, again, we have a reference to the texture number up here, starting from 0. But there are two different tags in here. We've got foreground and background. Background sits behind the characters, and foreground sits in front of them. And the highest entry here will be the furthest behind in game. So background texture 0 is sky, and it makes sense that that would be right on the back, and everything after that is drawn on top. Now, for any texture without a JSON, you'll need to designate an amount of auto frames. If this is just a static image, auto frames 1 makes sense. However, if you've got a sprite sheet here, either your character or your environment, you enter the amount of frames here that should be loaded into the game. You can also control the speed here with an entry called FPS. So the default is 1. If you don't enter a value here, it will play at 1 frame per second. And if you've animated it, at 10 frames a second, enter 10 here. You can obviously come back in here and tweak it until the speed looks right in the game. This can also have point values. If you're loading a JSON, it makes the most sense to leave that at 1 as the default value, because we actually tweaked the frame durations to match that, so they should match whatever application you've animated in. And then if you've got some scrolling in your background, scroll X or scroll Y will scroll by the speed you've designated. Now, another little trick is that you can actually, in the workshop directory, there's a file here called debug. Now, if you copy that into any environment directory, that's the only environment that will be loaded. So you could load forest by itself, and that means that when you start a match, it's the only environment that will be loaded, so you can guarantee that that's the environment you're going to be testing and making sure it's working. Along with this is, back in our workshop templates directory, is an advanced folder. And within advanced, we have a character and environment XML, and in here is a list of every possible attribute or tag that you can use to control your character. But I've just gone through the simplest ways to do this. And same goes for environment. Things like being able to disable the background music of a level when you're playing your environment, so you can include your own level music in your environment if that's something you want to do. As well as different things like pivots if you need to define them yourself. But yeah, you can go through them at your leisure. Now, once you've got your character or environment working in game how you'd like, you can simply open up the Western Press user-generated content uploader, which should pop up as an option when you launch Western Press. You can either choose a new character or new environment, and then simply fill out the fields: title, Juan Aguacate, description, something well written, Visibility, now you can obviously keep this private, or set it to friends only, or leave it public. They're pretty self-explanatory options. Preview image, we recommend a 1920 by 1080 or 1280 by 720 widescreen image as your preview image. This is what people see when they're browsing the workshop. The content directory is the directory we've just been working in. So you should select your character directory if it's a character, or your environment directory if it's an environment. Just remember to take out the debug file if you've had that in for testing, though the application should warn you. Content changes, you can submit a note. This is both for updating your character or submitting a new character, just to let people know what's changed in your content, whether or not it contains mature content. The GUID will be assigned automatically, and then you simply create your character. Editing works much the same way in that it's the same screen, and then you should have your Western Press content live on Workshop. Now, characters share online in the lobby. However, environments will only be synced if you both have the same environment, so you will need to go to the workshop and subscribe to your friends' environments for you both to see it working in game. If you have any questions at all, jump on the discussion forums and feel free to ask, and look forward to seeing what you create.
During a test failure on biogenetics at LA's General Lab Research Center, the virus called V113 escaped captivity and infected its first human host. The virus then infected almost everyone, causing them to turn aggressive, and people called this the earthquake. The world fell apart, and humanity only had a few living souls left. This is a time where survival is key. Having friends is best, and staying away from the dead is almost impossible. This is the AfterShock.